the Commission communication on countering threats from civilian drones, and the EU action plan for the Eastern Mediterranean migration route. So without further ado, Vice President, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Anita. Good afternoon, everybody. Indeed, we are presenting today a package with 5 distinct elements. Let me first clarify that we hadn't planned for the timing of the adoption of this package to coincide with the current wave of violence and terror, nor with the current geopolitical tensions in the Middle East. This was part of our planning. But let us, together with the Commissioner, take you quickly through these 5 elements. The first is the Security Union report, progress report, that assesses globally everything we have been done under the Security Union banner. The second is an EU roadmap on drugs, on which the Commissioner will elaborate more in detail. A communication on counter drones. The third element. The fourth, new rules for the visa suspension mechanism. And finally, an action plan on the Eastern Mediterranean route, which is security and migration related. Let me start quickly with the Security Union Progress Report. In this Commission, you would remember 4 years ago, the President made a strategic decision to create a single roof structure to streamline the many sectoral initiatives that the Commission has been developing over the years under security policies. This we call the EU Security Union House, and then within which, with individual policy constituencies, communities, commissioners, we have been building the individual chambers that provide substance to this idea. I think 4 years later, without any doubt, this option has been vindicated by the facts. We have presented 36 legislative initiatives under the Security Union framework. More than half from those have already been adopted, I would say in record time, by Council and Parliament. And we are now gearing to the last stretch of this drive with a lot of work that needs still to be done, but that would build on the solid progress achieved so far. Let me highlight especially the significant upgrade, regulatory upgrade, that we did both on the cybersecurity side with the reinforcement of the Network Information System Directive, also known as NIS2, but also in the area of protecting our critical infrastructure, where we also have strengthened with the modification of the directive the level of protection, and this is particularly important as we are seeing in parallel to this conference with the events in the French airports. Airports are now being covered by our regulatory framework for protecting our critical infrastructures. On what needs to be done, we need to be very, very cautious and alert on the ramifications of the organized crime, terrorism, drugs. The roadmap will be presented to you in a second. And also we need to be particular, and I repeat, particularly vigilant in the full implementation and proper application of the acquis in the area of security by our member states. We cannot allow ourselves to be asymmetrical, elliptical in the way we apply the legislation, the community legislation we decide. That's why today I have addressed a letter to all 27 ministers for European affairs to raise very clearly the issue of enforcement and remind them of what they still need to do. And I'm very also happy to go to the General Affairs Council and update the ministers on our security union work. The second element is the drugs. Ylva will tell you the novelties of this initiative, the roadmap for drugs. I only want to take this opportunity to thank Paolo Gentiloni, our colleague who is in charge of customs, because he worked with us to develop this EU Ports Alliance against drugs, which is an important element of the roadmap, and also to assure you that we will intensify our work with our partners in Latin American countries in fighting drug trafficking. The Commissioner and the Belgian Minister for Interior visited the area, the President followed, and I will be starting a tour of Latin American countries later this month precisely to continue projecting this message. Third element, drones. The use of civilian drones for nefarious purposes, ranging from espionage to privacy violations, security breaches, even acts of terrorism, is now becoming an issue in Europe. It's becoming an issue that governments need to address. We are offering, with this communication, a framework, a comprehensive understanding of what needs to be done, especially the capabilities of drones continue to expand, and we need to counter this, stay ahead of the curve, equip ourselves, protect our security privacy with uniform procedures and proportional countermeasures. The fourth element is the visa suspension mechanism and report. The EU has currently a visa-free regime with 60 third countries from all over the world. This brings us huge benefits, but at the same time makes our visa policy an important tool in our overall toolbox for foreign policy and international relations. But having said that, we also need to make sure that our visa policy framework is not misused and that we have the power to act when it is. You would remember, many of you present in this room already during the 2015-16 crisis with the migration crisis, that we said at the time that we need more tools in our toolbox to incentivize cooperation on readmission from third countries. And to do that, we have this visa suspension mechanism, which was constructed at the time, but now in the light of experiences we found that needs adaptation. It needs more definitions, it needs more dynamism, it needs more sharpening, if you like, of the regulatory provision. So we are revisiting this visa suspension mechanism now to address and add new suspension grounds. We introduce new reasons to suspend visas for hybrid threats, citizenship, investor schemes, and lack of visa policy alignments. You would remember that that's a problem that we had along the Western Balkans route, where we asked our Western Balkan partners and obtained to align their visa policies with us. We're strengthening the monitoring of the mechanism and we're streamlining procedure. Finally, on the Eastern Mediterranean route, tomorrow we have in Luxembourg the Justice and Home Affairs Council, and there we will present this Eastern Mediterranean route action plan. You will remember that we have already addressed similar action plans on the specific challenges along specific routes in the Central Mediterranean, in the Western Balkan, and the West Mediterranean Atlantic routes. So this is the fourth. We have seen sustained pressure in Cyprus and in Greece over the last year, and this action plan contains 29 specific different measures to alleviate the pressure along that route and of our member states. Part of the solution will have to be the increased engagement with third countries, something we continue to invest heavily in and something that we'll discuss tomorrow also with the ministers. The Commissioner did extensive migration diplomacy, and I myself completed only 2 days ago a tour of West Africa where I visited Ivory Coast, Senegal, Guinea, Conakry, Mauritania and Gambia to strengthen our relations with these countries of origin and transit. We have instruments to help us in this respect, most of which are also timely. We have the MFF midterm review, where migration would be one of the central elements for additional resources. we have the revision of our external funding instrument, which comes with the unpronounceable abbreviation NDICI, which stands for Neighborhood International Development Cooperation Initiative. This will be reviewed to reflect what we can do more for those who cooperate. And finally, we have the EU-Turkey statement, which remains the main framework for cooperation on migration along the Eastern Mediterranean route. And this is why both the Commissioner and myself, we made it clear that we'll continue to engage with Turkey in a Team Europe approach. Thank you, Anita, and apologies, Ylva, for...
I have a chair.
You have a chair.
Thank you, Vice President.
It's yours.
Thank you very much. As Marguerite has already explained, we have a lot on the plate today, a different proposal. And even though, let me just start with another thing, and that was the terrorist attack here in Brussels less than 2 days ago, where 3 Swedes were attacked, 2 of them shot dead. Football is a very important part of my life. I spent a lot of years engaging in different levels in the Swedish National Football Association. Going to games is one of the big joy in my life. And I share that with millions of people. And I share that with those that were attacked Monday evening here in Brussels. They were wearing the national team skirts, and they were looking forward to go to the game and to watch their national team play. And they were shot dead by these terrorists just because they were Swedes. And I think that this also calls that the fight against terrorism really always have to be high on our agenda. I've been in contact, of course, with the Belgian Minister of Interior, with the Swedish Minister of Justice, with Catherine de Boll from Europol, with Ilka Salmi, the counter-terrorism coordinator, and I can say that the work that they are doing all together is very good. But I think it's also clear that we need to do more for those people that are here, like this person who is now dead, this attacker, that have been here for many years in the European Union and had a return decision and are legally staying, but still present in the European Union. We need to step up our efforts to be able to send people back to the country of origins. And this is one of the things I will raise tomorrow in the Council in Luxembourg. On the roadmap that we are presenting today on fighting organised crime and drug trafficking, it's really high time to do more in this area. Why? Because the organised criminal groups are getting stronger and stronger. They are being more and more international, more and more professional, more and more violent. And they are not always, but very often linked to drug trafficking. Half of all the homicides that are being carried out in the European Union are linked to drug trafficking. Many of those that we see killed in our streets, the violence that we can see in our streets, is organised criminal groups are behind and very often also linked to drugs. What we need to do and what we are presenting in this roadmap is a paradigm shift. We need to go for the highest level of these organised criminal groups. We need to go for the whole network. It's not enough to arrest and prosecute individuals on the streets that are carrying the guns or trafficking the drugs. Of course, this needs to be done as well, but this is not enough because we have to go for the whole network. And it takes a network to fight a network. And that's why the European level is so important, but also, as Margrethe also mentioned, our cooperation with third countries, not at least the Latin American ones. And I'm very grateful to the Spanish presidency, who invited all the ministers of interior of the Latin American countries to make joint efforts in this area. And to give you one example of what it can be when we do this, going for the whole network, we had last November an operation called Desert Light. That was a super cartel controlling 1/3 of the cocaine trade in the EU. The orchestrators of this was the global business. They were arrested in Dubai. This was an operation that involved Europol, the US drug agency, French, Dutch, Belgian, Spanish police, but also United Arab Emirates Ministry of Interior and the Dubai police force. And this cartel had leaders, so there were Irish, Italian, Bosnian and Dutch, and they all have active links to Latin America. Out of this very successful operation that cracked down 1/3 of the trade of cocaine in the European Union, we made 49 arrests in different countries, both inside the EU and outside. And I think this also illustrates the importance and what we can achieve when we work together, when we are building this network to fight the networks. So this is one of the important part. Another important part of what was also mentioned by Margaritis is that we need to focus on the ports. 75% of all goods that enter into the European Union comes via our ports. That's huge, and that's extremely important, of course, but that means it's also extremely easy to get these ports for drug trafficking. And it's difficult for the ports to find out. Just like a port like Antwerp, they have 12 million containers per year coming into the port. Of course, this means that we need to be very smart when we work how to address this. That's why we are focusing this year on a thematic Schengen evaluation, specifically focusing on drug trafficking and specifically focusing on the security in ports. And that's why we are setting up this port alliance together with the private companies in the ports, in shipping companies, together with law enforcement and together with the customs unity. And this is really important, and we also have additional money to step up the customs actions in this area. Last thing I would like to mention from this roadmap is the prevention side. A lot of things need to be done on prevention, and I just want to mention one thing that is very close to my heart. It's the prevention of children being recruited into these criminal gangs. The country I know best, we had last week in Tullinge, which is the same area where I grew up, a 16-year-old who shot 2 women, dead, and also there were several children in the same home when he killed them. And this 16-year-old that committed these 2 murders, he also committed another murder earlier the same week. I should say that these children are being recruited into the criminal gangs. They are like child soldiers. And I think it's extremely important that we step our joint efforts in prevention of these children going into these extremely dangerous, extremely violent criminal activities that they are actually in right now. Last thing I would like to mention is one word on the visa suspension and one word on the Eastern Med Action Plan. On the visa suspension, we have quite sharp regulation when it comes to make the assessment whether a new country will become visa-free or not for travelling to the European Union. But when it comes to suspension, we have not so good tools. That is why we are doing this. And just to give you 2 examples of why this is important. Last year, we had around 150,000 asylum applications from citizens coming from visa-free countries. And of course, this is huge. And this is, of course, not how the visa-free travelling should be used. Another example is that we have countries with the visa-free regime with the EU that are selling passports, citizenships, quite cheap, to people that are security risks or potential security risks to the European Union. And these new citizens are not always even obliged to live in the country. They are sometimes allowed to change their names and identity several times after getting the new citizenship. And of course, this is also a security risk for the European Union that we have to look into. So these are 2 reasons why we are doing this revision of the visa suspension mechanism. Last, Margaritis already said most of it on the Eastern Med Action Plan for irregular arrivals. But I think it's important to say that with this action plan, we now cover all the main routes for irregular arrivals to the European Union. And you know we are heavily engaged in getting the final decisions now on the negotiations on the pact, and this is important. But besides the regulation and the legislation that is necessary, we also need to continue working to prevent the irregular arrivals along the routes and working with third countries, fighting the smugglers and step up on the returns. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Commissioner. Now we will open the floor to your questions. To present yourself and the media outlet you are working for. Giovanni. Yeah.
Giovanni Del Re from the Italian newspaper Avvenire. Actually, I have two questions, if I may, for both commissioners. And the first one is, today President von der Leyen mentioned your proposal for making possible to force migrants which represent a security threat to leave the EU. If you can maybe elaborate more on this proposal. And the second question is, I would like to know whether you share Prime Minister Meloni's assessment that the events in Arras and in Brussels prove that mass irregular migration constitutes also a huge security risk. Thank you very much.
Let me start with a brief comment, and then the Commissioner will offer you more detail. On the first question, yes. We have tabled a proposal for meaningful returns for the type of people that have a security background that makes us believe that have to go back. This is part of our proposals. It's justified. Both attackers in Brussels and in France had exactly that profile. And this is the only element of the EU pact for asylum and migration on which we do not yet have a common position. So, what else can we say? We don't need more evidence that these proposals were right, and we need this to happen yesterday. And I was yesterday in the European Parliament plenary, where I was somehow attacked by the extreme right, saying that Europe is the problem, and I had the chance to tell them that Europe is the solution to that problem, provided that we get these rules enacted. So thank you for reiterating this again here at the Commission press room. On your second question, I never comment other people's comments, but one of the things that I think both of us have learned in dealing with migration policy is that what matters is not the debate, is not comments on facts, it's not the diagnostics. We were past beyond that point. We're in the business of solutions and leaving behind a legacy that would allow for this Commission to be remembered as the first and only one who set up a regulatory framework for migration and asylum, and we are very close to achieving this goal.
Yes, on the first, today with the current legislation is discretionary for member states whether they would like to, people with a return decision, whether they should be forced directly back to the country of origin or not. With our proposal on the table, we make it mandatory to do that in all member states, and I hope that there will be agreement. We are still pending the negotiating position from the Parliament, and as soon as we have that, we will start the trialogue on this as well. On your second question, I think it's important to mention, of course, that each individual are responsible for their actions. People who commit crime have to be prosecuted for these crimes, and they have to be responsible. It's also an important principle of rule of law. People that do not commit crimes are not guilty of crimes. So this is also an important part. But having said that, I must say that the fact that we have a lot of people staying illegally in the European Union with a return decision do not have the right to be here, and they are not being, just a fraction of those are actually forced to go back to the country. This is a huge problem, and this is what we are addressing. And I will tell the ministers tomorrow in the Council that now when we are focusing on the returns, with all the different tools that we have to our disposal, not at least the return coordinator, we see now a significant increase of the effective returns from the European Union. And of course, this is not enough. We need to continue, but this is really a challenge and a problem that need to be addressed also with further actions.
Thank you, Odile.
Odile Harvey pour Radio Nord-Bretagne. Ce matin sur la BBC, vous avez peut-être entendu l'appel du First Minister of Scotland, Humza Yousaf, qui est d'origine palestinienne, à la fois palestinien, écossais au Royaume-Uni, et qui a toujours de la famille à Gaza en ce moment si dramatique. Et il a lancé un appel en disant qu'on devait avoir la compassion et qu'on devait ouvrir nos cœurs et nos maisons aux Palestiniens qui souhaiteraient venir en Écosse, c'était le cas. Bon, le Royaume-Uni n'est plus dans l'Union européenne, mais vous risquez d'avoir de semblables appels aussi de la part d'autres organisations ou d'autres leaders de l'Union européenne. Quelle est votre réaction? Merci.
On ne va pas prendre ta question maintenant. En fait, on va prendre que des questions pertinentes à ces sujets, mais après on peut ouvrir la discussion pour d'autres questions. So I would please ask you to just ask questions first pertaining to these specific files presented, and then we can open for the floor. Lisa.
Swedish.
Well, I think
Chinas, I would like very much to ask my question in Swedish to the Swedish Commissioner Ylva Johansson. As you said, it was very bad timing perhaps for this package following the terror attack on Monday evening, which, as the Commissioner said, targeted Swedes. But Belgian authorities have already lowered its threat alert. I think the alert is still higher in Sweden since summer because of the Quran burnings. And the authorities also said that the attack was obviously carried out by a lone wolf. And it illustrates, as you said, the loopholes in the current, let's say, return policy and also internal controls. Okay, sorry. Så min fråga till er båda två är i så fall, anser ni att läget nu här i Europa och speciellt kanske här i Bryssel börjar påminna om terroristhoten för några år sedan då ISIS kontrollerar stora delar av Irak och Syrien. Det är den ena frågan. Och den andra frågan är också kopplad till Sverige. Därför att Sverige har faktiskt reviderat nyligen sin antiterrorismlagstiftning till följd av de turkiska kraven för den svenska NATO-ansökan. Och där kriminaliserar man nu medverkan och stöd till terroristorganisationer. Kanske även öppna upp för förbud mot demonstrationer till stöd för sådana organisationer. Och i nuvarande läget vet vi att vissa EU-länder har faktiskt förbjudit till exempel demonstrationer till stöd för Hamas för att motverka den ökande polariseringen i Europa. Är det någonting som kommissionen kunde tänka sig att stödja?
I will answer in Swedish, at least in English, I hope that's okay. So first on the terrorist threat. So we are following this on a daily basis, of course, and also together with the member states, of course, and with the counter-terrorism coordinator. So the terrorist threat is still high. in the European Union. It might increase. We are not there yet, but we are always staying vigilant for that. We see also the changing in patterns, where, for example, we see now more of lone wolf attacks. If this specific attack in Brussels was a lone wolf, I think it's too early to actually say, but there are signs in that direction. We see also that the radicalization online is really one of the increasing threats. We see also more people being radicalized in patterns that are not only traditional. Sometimes I call it do-it-yourself ideology. They pick a little bit of hating Jewish or hating gays or hating women or hating governments or hating whatever, and they mix it in a very violent and dangerous way. So the patterns are changing, but I think that we have to stay very vigilant with the situation right now, and of course also the situation that we have now in Israel and the Gaza Strip, of course, could also lead to radicalization in the European Union. So this is something that we always have under our radar. On the Swedish legislation on the anti-terrorism, because I'm Swedish, I know about this. So this is actually Sweden complying with the EU legislation. The EU legislation asks all member states to make it criminal to be part of a terrorist organization. And this, the Commission, the previous Commission, has been pushing Sweden because Sweden was late in implementing this change in the Swedish law. Now they have done it. I welcome that. But this change is Sweden complying with the EU legislation is not about anything else. And this is what the Commission has been pushing for a long time. The Commission will, of course, not push for forbidding the right for free speech or demonstrations.
If I can make two comments on Moses' question. First is that we are not going to discuss in the Commission press room the specific ways that we are preparing against security and terrorist threats in Europe, but I have two remarks. Moses, first, we are particularly concerned for the safety and protection of our Jewish communities across the European Union. We discussed this at the college yesterday, and we all agreed that this is a priority. They have been already facing security problems before the events in the Middle East, but now they are our top priority. They merit all our protection, not only the places of worship, but also their schools, their communities, and we will be there for them. The second remark is that, having said that, I would very strongly argue against any unjustified Islamophobia in Europe as a result of events in the Middle East. We have built cohesive, resilient societies in Europe. We defend and protect and promote the European way of life as a framework where everybody can coexist in peace, respect and harmony with others. So both these considerations work nowadays.
Thank you. Lisa. And do please keep it concise because we need to keep track of time. Well,
it's an important subject, isn't it? My name is Lisa O'Carroll. I'm from The Guardian. So about this proposal to make returns mandatory, can you give us a little bit more of the background to that? Is that a completely new text in the proposal? Do you have statistics on the numbers of people who have return decisions or had their asylum application rejected, after the whole process has been exhausted and then have not been returned? And what sort of criteria will be envisaged if this proposal is accepted by the Council and the Parliament? Thank you.
Let me first say that this is not new. There will be no migration and asylum policy in the European Union without a meaningful returns culture. Or put it differently, Europe will always continue to be a place of asylum for those who flee war, persecution and discrimination. But those who have no reason to be under the protection of the European Union cannot stay with us. This is the fundamental premise on which we built, together with the Commissioner, our proposals for a comprehensive migration and asylum pact, of which the Returns Directive is part. Since then, we now have common agreement, common positions from the Council and Parliament on all aspects of the package, except the Returns Directive, where Parliament has not yet provided a common position. So, I had a sound bite, but better not say it. Let's stay there.
Yeah, I just it's exactly this. The Return Directive have this proposal that if a person with a return decision imposing is a security risk, then this person and the member state should be obliged to send that person back immediately. And this is an old proposal that we hope to start trialogues on pretty soon. But second is, of course, that we need to do more on other parts of returns as well. And that is what we are doing. And that's why we see an increase with almost 20% of the returns so far this year. And that means that we are using the so-called 25A in the visa mechanism. It's that we have the new return coordinator, that we have a new approach when we reach out to third countries with a more comprehensive approach on migration, and that we also are doing a lot of other things when it comes to returns. The figures are approximately 400,000 decisions per year on returns in the European Union, and so far this year we have returned approximately 65,000.
Thank you.
Thank you, Laura Dubois, for the FT. Belgian politicians have called for more engagement with third countries on returns and on migration. Could you give us an update on the negotiations with countries such as Morocco and Egypt, which member states tell us are quite advanced? Thank you.
Let me first say, indeed, that relations with countries of origin and transit, or otherwise the external dimension of migration policy, is one of the issues where we have unanimous, universal agreement between our member states. If there is one area in which everybody agrees, it's this one. The number of countries of origin and transit that we have to cooperate with is not infinite. We're talking about 25, more or less, third countries of origin and transit. And we have to be able to engage with all of them in a spirit of partnership, not in a spirit of subdelegating our obligations as European Union to others or subcontracting, if you like. No, these are holistic partnership agreements that mobilize everything the European Union can offer, not only investment and money, but also trade preferences, visas, Erasmus scholarships. And we believe that through this understanding, through this holistic understanding with countries of origin and transit, they will understand that they have much more to win by working with the European Union rather than not cooperating with the European Union on prevention, on returns, readmission, creating better lives for their citizens there. So this is the overall logic of our relations with countries of origin and transit. And within this family of 25, we have different levels of agreements, MOUs, understandings. We have the EU-Turkey statement from 2016. We have the comprehensive agreements with Morocco. We have MOU with Tunisia. We have an understanding with countries of origin and transit in West Africa, as I was telling you earlier. So this is a work that will not stop. We will engage with everybody. And when I say we, it's not only the Commissioner and myself, but all our colleagues, all our member states. Team Europe approach is what we need to make a difference there.
Thank you. We take two more questions.
Hi, Hanne Gokelere from Politico. I wanted to ask one more question about the drug trafficking strategy that you just presented, particularly on the aspect of infiltration in ports, which you hear increasingly is a very important part of these drug trafficking networks. The extent to which they're infiltrating every little part of the supply chain, and the human element in that, of course. They have insiders who cooperate willingly and very often unwillingly. How can the EU address that?
Yes, it's necessary to address it first. You are perfectly right, because all this trafficking of drugs into our ports will not be possible without corruption. And we have the huge, important new legislation on the table that I presented earlier this year on the anti-corruption legislation. And this is really important now that the co-legislators do not water this down, but to agree on this ambitious level that the Commission has proposed on the new legislation on anti-corruption. So this will be one important part, that we do this, actually adopt this new legislation. But that will not be enough. So to be honest with you, we don't have all the knowledge on how this works. We have a very excellent report from Europol that Europol did together with some member states and ports on how this corruption in ports acts. And that's the reason why we started this thematic Schengen evaluation this year, specifically focusing on drug trafficking and specifically focusing on ports, just to find out where do we have the weak points. So I hope that the result of this evaluation will help us to be more targeted in how also we from the Commission side can support the Member States and how they should protect their ports better. And then also it's important of protecting other ports. I was in Guayaquil in Ecuador, and most of the cocaine leaves Latin America to the EU. And this is also, I have offered Ecuador and Ecuadorian authorities that we could work together, use the knowledge that we will get from our evaluation and our port alliance to support also their efforts in their port. And the shipping companies that we will include in our port alliance, of course, they also go to Latin America. So they are not only going from EU member states to other EU member states, but they cross the Atlantic. So we are working on it. So we have something on the table, but in my view, this is not enough. That's why we have started these other different steps.
Thank you. We're moving to the platform. Gianluca.
Thank you for the floor. Can you hear me? Gianluca Martucci, Totally Production, Italian Multimedia News Agency. I have a question. The terrorist who killed two Swedish citizens 2 days ago was a person who had a return procedure. But the problem was that there was a lack of communication between the migrants register in Belgium and the police. So the European Union, as far as I know, it seems like this, has the rules to facilitate the return. But the problem is the implementation of the rules by the member states. Is it a failure for you, this kind of system? So is there a lack of implementation instead of having more rules on returns? Thank you very much for taking the floor.
The answer is yes. And that's why we have stepped up in this area. I met this morning with Marie Juric, who is the EU return coordinator. She has been in the office for 1.5 years. The high-level network of experts from EU member states has been active now since 1 year. We have the implementation, what is called action plan or strategic things to implement in member states since half a year. And now we start to see progress. So you are right in focusing on the implementation. It's not enough to have the legislation. We also can see very clearly that we can do much better in each member state, and also that when member states work together on this and support each other also in the returns. And this is what is ongoing right now. And I should say that this is one, maybe the single most important part of why we now see an increase of the active returns that we actually carry out, is the work of the EU return coordinator, what she's doing together with the member states in the implementation, closing the loopholes, because there are so many loopholes in all the different member states. And of course, we need to support the member states on how to close these.
Yes, just a remark. I'm not sure Gianluca followed the earlier part of the press conference. Of course, we need implementation, but we need the legislation too. So this is the message, and we hope that people are listening.
One more last question, Gregorio.
Hello, good afternoon. This is Gregorio Sorgi from Political Europe, and I had a follow-up to a question that was previously asked Vice President Skinas about the possibility of negotiating new MOUs with Morocco and Egypt. Last week in Vienna, the Vice President was very keen on negotiating a new MOU with Egypt in the foreseeable future. So I wanted to ask if the talks are already ongoing, and if not, could you provide a dateline on when you would like to start negotiations with Egypt to reach an MOU?
First of all, I'm very flattered that you followed my ICMPD conference in Vienna, but I'm not sure that I said that we need an MOU with Egypt. I said that now we need to engage actively with Egypt to make sure that Egypt gets all the backing they merit for their very important role in the region as a transit country. You may know that from Egypt we have almost zero direct arrivals in the European Union, but we do have, due to the situation in Libya, a movement of Egyptians through Libya. So yes, I agree, together with my colleagues and the Commission and the President herself, that we need to intensify and continue engaging with our Egyptian partners. I would say now, due to the events in the Middle East, this is becoming even more pressing than it was the case when I first raised the issue. But note, I'm not ready to offer you now a very forensic, accurate, precise state of play of the discussions towards this result.
Thank you.
Well, with Morocco, we already... Sorry, who asked? Is this permitted?
Last one.
Last. Yes, with Morocco, we already have a very comprehensive framework for cooperation that covers, indeed, migration and security. I don't have the figures now with me, but I think it's of the order of maybe 400 million euros for a significant time, a couple of years, I think, and this is working well. And we do not need to undo what works well, eventually to perfect it, but we are very happy overall with the situation, with the engagement and the cooperation of Morocco in the area of migration.
Thank you very much, Vice President, Commissioner. This concludes our press conference. Good afternoon to everybody.